The Apache helicopter was falling apart mid-air. Enemy fire had shredded the tail rotor, the navigation system was dead, and fuel was bleeding out across the desert sky. Any normal pilot would have crashed in flames, but as she pulled moves that defied every law of physics, the rescue team watching from below realized they weren't seeing a mechanic fly. They were watching a ghost return from the dead. But let me take you back to where this story really begins. "Just a mechanic," they whispered as she tightened the rotor bolts. "Nose engines, not flying." Lieutenant Jake Morrison smirked as he walked past Hangar 7, his gold wings catching the morning sun. "Try not to break anything important while you're playing with tools, grease monkey." Sarah Mitchell didn't look up from her work beneath the Apache helicopter. For 3 years, she had endured these comments, biting her tongue while pilots who had never faced real combat questioned her competence. What they didn't know was that she had been deliberately hiding the most dangerous secret in military aviation. The truth was, Sarah Mitchell was supposed to be dead. Before we continue this incredible story, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Her real name was Major Sarah Valkyrie Kane, officially listed as killed in action 5 years ago when her Apache was shot down over Syria. The explosion had been captured on satellite footage, the wreckage confirmed, and her family had received a folded flag. But Sarah had survived the crash, endured 8 months in an enemy prison, and emerged so psychologically shattered that the only way to heal was to disappear completely. The Army had helped her create a new identity, understanding that some veterans need to shed their past entirely. Working as a helicopter mechanic seemed therapeutic, maintaining the same machines she had once piloted into combat, staying connected to aviation without the trauma of command decisions. But some instincts never fade. At 13:47 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, everything changed when enemy helicopters appeared on the horizon like dark angels of death. The attack was swift and devastating. Explosions rocked the base as stolen military aircraft, operated by a well-equipped terrorist cell, swept in low and fast. In 10 minutes, Black Hawk Air Base lost most of its defensive aircraft and nearly all its qualified pilots. Those who survived were either wounded or pinned down, unable to reach the remaining helicopters. Sarah was replacing hydraulic fittings when the first blast shook Hangar 7. Tools rattled off workbenches as emergency alarms screamed throughout the facility. She grabbed the nearest radio as dust rained from the ceiling. "Tower, this is Hangar 7. What's our status?" Chaos erupted through the speaker, multiple voices shouting, reports of casualties, the raw panic of men fighting for their lives. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the noise. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We are under attack by hostile aircraft. Any qualified pilots report immediately." Sarah waited for responses from Morrison, Captain Williams, or any of the other pilots. But as explosions continued and minutes passed, the airwaves remained silent. Master Sergeant Rodriguez's desperate voice finally crackled through. "Tower, we've lost contact with pilot personnel. I have one operational Apache in Hangar 7, but no one qualified to fly it." That's when 3 years of carefully maintained anonymity came to an end. Sarah looked up at the fully armed Apache above her, the machine she had spent 6 weeks bringing to absolute perfection. Unlike the aircraft on the burning flight line, this one was protected and ready. She walked to the emergency radio with hands that were suddenly steady for the first time in years. "Tower, this is Hangar 7. I can get that bird airborne." "Hangar 7, identify yourself. Are you a qualified pilot?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her hidden identity about to crumble. When she opened them, they held a focus that had been absent for 3 years. "Tower, this is call sign Valkyrie. I'm qualified on Apache systems and requesting immediate combat clearance." The radio went silent except for distant explosions. She could imagine the confusion in the control tower as they tried to reconcile the quiet mechanic with a pilot call sign that didn't appear on any roster. "Valkyrie, I don't show you on any authorization list," Colonel Harrison's voice returned, tight with desperation. But if you can fly that aircraft, you are cleared for immediate takeoff, multiple hostiles in the area using military equipment. Sarah was already moving, her body remembering procedures drilled into her through years of intensive training. She strapped into the pilot's seat, and the transformation was instantaneous. The broken woman hiding behind coveralls was gone, replaced by one of the most lethal combat pilots in Army aviation history. The Apache's twin turboshaft engines spun up with a rising whine that resonated through her bones. The familiar vibration of the rotor system awakened reflexes that had been dormant, but never lost. 3 years away from flying might as well have been 3 minutes. Master Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at the hangar entrance, his face showing disbelief as he watched the quiet mechanic move through pre-flight with fluid expertise. "Sarah, what the hell's happening?" She keyed her radio. "Opening hangar doors, Sergeant. Time to go to work." The massive doors split apart, revealing a base transformed into hell. Smoke columns rose from multiple impact points, and enemy helicopters moved like predators against the desert sky, hunting among the burning wreckage. Sarah lifted off with smooth control inputs, the Apache responding like an extension of her will. The enemy had made a fatal error by assuming Black Hawk's air defenses were neutralized. They were flying in loose formation, overconfident and exposed. She approached from the north, using buildings as concealment while assessing targets. 4 enemy aircraft remained airborne, conducting damage assessment rather than maintaining defensive awareness. Sarah selected her first victim with mathematical precision. The lead helicopter was flying predictably, its crew focused on ground coordination. She lined up her shot and squeezed the trigger for her 30mm chain gun. The burst lasted 1.2 seconds and sent 47 high-explosive rounds into the enemy's engine compartment. The helicopter disintegrated in a spectacular fireball that announced to everyone within 50 miles that Black Hawk was no longer defenseless. The second enemy pilot reacted quickly, breaking formation and attempting to engage. But Sarah was already moving, using superior maneuverability to slip inside the enemy's turning radius while gaining altitude. Another precise burst, and a second helicopter joined the first as burning debris. But it was the third engagement that would be analyzed in military schools for decades. The remaining 2 enemy helicopters regrouped and converged on her position with coordinated tactics. They had altitude, positioning, and numerical advantage. By every conventional measure, she should have withdrawn. Instead, Sarah executed something that existed only in theoretical discussions. She rolled the Apache completely inverted and dove straight down at the enemy formation at full power. The maneuver defied every principle of rotary wing combat doctrine and pushed the aircraft beyond recommended parameters. But Sarah had pioneered unconventional tactics during her active service, earning her reputation by achieving the impossible. The enemy pilots, expecting standard attack profiles, were completely unprepared for an Apache diving on them upside down at terminal velocity. Sarah's inverted gunfire was devastatingly accurate, destroying both aircraft before they could react. This was the moment our story began, the impossible maneuver that left ground observers speechless. In less than 8 minutes, she had eliminated the entire enemy air threat and restored air superiority to Black Hawk Air Base. As Sarah set the Apache down on the main landing pad, base personnel approached with expressions of awe. Emergency crews worked to contain fires, but everyone kept glancing toward the helicopter that had just saved their lives. Colonel Harrison reached the aircraft first, as Sarah shut down engines and removed her helmet. His face showed strain, but also dawning recognition. "Valkyrie," he said simply, "I think we need a very long conversation." Sarah looked around at assembled faces. Rodriguez stood with his mouth agape. Morrison, who had survived with minor wounds, stared as if witnessing resurrection. The woman they had dismissed as just a mechanic had demonstrated flying skills that bordered on supernatural. "My real name is Major Sarah Kane," she announced. "I was officially listed killed in action 5 years ago during a classified mission in Syria. For 3 years, I've been living under an assumed identity because I believed my fighting days were over." Colonel Harrison nodded as pieces fell into place. "Major Kane, call sign Valkyrie. I've read classified briefings about you, the pilot who could make helicopters do impossible things." "I was," Sarah replied quietly. "Sometimes circumstances require the impossible." In the weeks following, Sarah's return to active duty was processed through highly classified channels. Officially, she was reinstated as major and assigned as chief instructor for advanced combat techniques. Unofficially, she became legend among pilots who had previously dismissed her. Morrison, humbled and grateful, approached her one morning as she inspected the same Apache she had used to save the base. "Major Kane," he said, arrogance replaced by authentic respect, "I owe you an apology for my behavior and my life." Sarah looked up from her checklist, seeing new understanding in the young pilot's eyes. "You don't owe me anything, Lieutenant, but perhaps you'll remember that you never know who's standing beside you or what they've sacrificed to be there." Morrison nodded earnestly. "Would you teach me the tactics you used?" Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time in 3 years. "Some things can't be taught through classroom instruction. They're learned through experience you hope you'll never need. But we can work on fundamentals." The story of how Sarah Mitchell became Sarah Kane again spread through whispered conversations and classified reports. Young pilots learned that the quiet woman maintaining their aircraft possessed skills that redefined what was possible in rotary wing combat. But Sarah had also learned something profound during her years in hiding. The greatest service sometimes comes from those who serve in silence, fixing what's broken, maintaining what keeps others safe, never seeking recognition for the knowledge and sacrifice they carry. The Apache she had flown sat ready in Hangar 7, maintained by hands that understood every component and flown by a pilot who had discovered that some ghosts return not to haunt, but to protect. As evening approached and the desert sky painted itself in brilliant oranges and crimsons, Sarah walked past the maintenance bay where new mechanics worked on aircraft. She paused, remembering her 3 years among them. The therapeutic rhythm of maintenance work, the satisfaction of keeping complex machines operational, the quiet dignity of essential work performed without recognition. The young mechanics didn't know her story. To them, she was now Major Kane, the legendary pilot who had returned from the dead to save their base. But Sarah remembered being one of them, finding peace in the honest work of maintaining the machines that kept others safe. Master Sergeant Rodriguez joined her at the hangar entrance, coffee in hand as he watched the evening shift prepare aircraft for tomorrow's operations. "Strange how things work out," he said quietly. 3 years I worked beside you, never knowing I was standing next to a legend." Sarah considered this. "Maybe that's the point, Sergeant. Maybe the real legends are the ones who don't need anyone to know they're legends." Rodriguez smiled. "You going to keep working maintenance?" "When I can," Sarah replied. "Flying is what I do, but maintenance is what keeps everyone flying. Both matter." The base had settled into evening routine. Aircraft secured, personnel rotating shifts, the constant vigilance of military readiness. But now that vigilance included the knowledge that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, that heroes don't always wear the uniforms or carry the titles that announce their capabilities. Sarah had learned during her time as a mechanic that every person on a military base, from the lowest-ranking maintainer to the highest-ranking officer, played a crucial role in the mission. The pilot who flew the aircraft, the mechanic who kept it airworthy, the controller who guided it safely, all were essential components of something larger than any individual. Her story became part of Black Hawk's heritage, told not as a tale of individual heroism, but as a reminder that exceptional people often hide in plain sight, serving quietly until circumstances demand they reveal their true capabilities. The Apache in Hangar 7 remained operational, ready for whatever challenges might emerge. Its maintenance log showed meticulous care, every system checked, every component verified, every detail perfect. It was maintained by someone who understood not just the technical requirements, but the sacred trust between pilot and machine, between those who fly and those who ensure safe flight. Lieutenant Morrison had indeed learned from Sarah, but not just tactical flying techniques. He learned to respect every person on the base, understanding that rank and position don't always reveal capability or sacrifice. He learned that the quiet professionals keeping aircraft operational might possess knowledge and experience that surpassed his own. The maintenance crew in Hangar 7 worked with new awareness, knowing their daily efforts contributed to something vital. They maintained their aircraft with the understanding that their work might someday be the difference between life and death, between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah's transformation from hidden legend to acknowledged expert had shown everyone that service takes many forms. Sometimes it involves flying into combat, pulling impossible maneuvers, and achieving victory against overwhelming odds. Sometimes it involves the patient, precise work of maintenance, the quiet dedication of keeping complex systems operational, the willingness to remain anonymous while performing essential tasks. As night settled over Black Hawk Air Base, Sarah made her final inspection of the aircraft that had carried her back to her true self. Every bolt properly torqued, every fluid level correct, every system ready for operation. It was maintained by someone who understood both the technical requirements and the deeper purpose, protecting those who serve, enabling those who defend, ensuring readiness for whatever challenges might come. The war had called her back, and Valkyrie had answered with thunder. But she had also learned that some of the most important battles are fought not in the sky, but in the quiet spaces where skilled hands maintain the tools of freedom, where dedicated professionals prepare for dangers they hope will never come. The legend of Valkyrie would continue, but so would the essential work of maintenance, of preparation, of quiet service that makes legends possible. The months that followed brought changes that rippled through the entire military aviation community. Sarah's unconventional tactics were studied, analyzed, and cautiously incorporated into advanced flight training programs. The inverted dive maneuver she had executed became known unofficially as the Valkyrie Drop, though it remained classified at the highest levels. Military strategists recognized that her success hadn't come from following established doctrine, but from transcending it entirely. Word of the incident spread through carefully controlled channels, reaching other bases where veteran pilots shared stories of their own encounters with extraordinary personnel hiding in plain sight. The Pentagon quietly issued new directives emphasizing the importance of recognizing and utilizing all available talent during crisis situations, regardless of official job descriptions or apparent qualifications. Sarah's story became a case study in leadership schools, teaching officers to look beyond surface appearances and formal credentials when assessing capabilities. What struck observers most profoundly wasn't just Sarah's piloting skills, but her seamless transition between identities. She continued working maintenance shifts alongside her flight duties, moving effortlessly between the hangar floor and the cockpit. This duality challenged traditional military hierarchies and demonstrated that expertise doesn't always align with rank or position. Her example inspired a new generation of military personnel to develop diverse skill sets and maintain humility regardless of their official roles. The quiet mechanic who had become a legendary pilot remained, at heart, someone who understood that true strength often lies in the willingness to serve without recognition, until the moment when recognition becomes irrelevant and only capability matters. The desert wind whispered across Black Hawk Air Base as another day ended, carrying with it the lesson that would resonate far beyond the boundaries of military service. Sarah's story reminds us that in a world obsessed with titles, credentials, and appearances, the most extraordinary people often walk among us unrecognized. The mechanic in coveralls might be a master craftsman, the librarian could be a published scholar, the janitor might be a decorated veteran. True strength doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It reveals itself through action when action is needed most. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone ignores, and sometimes the most valuable lesson comes from understanding that capability and character matter far more than position or perception.